The only thing that our application needs is the ability to edit user profiles. And in order to do that, we need the user profile repository and the user profile service. Now, I've already created these things, but I haven't implemented anything within the service. We're going to do that within this lesson. But the repository itself is nothing spectacular. There are no extra methods for the user profile repository. So the only members that our user profile repository has are those defined by the iRepository interface. So let's close those files. I went ahead and added the user profile repository to the context and the iContext interface. So that has already been set up. I created the iUser profile service interface, but I haven't defined any members there. And I also created the profile service. And all I've done here is added the private fields that our servers are going to need, and then the constructor. And the reason why I wrote this code was so that I could go ahead and add the profiles service to the Ribbit controller base class, so that we already have that available inside of our controllers. So now we can focus on editing the user profile. So let's go to our controllers folder, and let's open up the profile controller class. The index action method is going to display our edit form. So inside of this method, the first thing we need to do is check to see if the user is authenticated. And if they aren't, we will redirect them to the index action method on the home controller. But if the user is logged in, then we first of all want to retrieve the profile for this user. And for that, we will use our profiles service. Now, we don't have a method to retrieve a profile, but we can follow the same pattern that we've been using for our other services. We can have a method called getBy, where we can then pass the ID of the profile. And we have this thanks to our current user object, which has a user profile ID property. Now, we could pass this profile to our view, but do we really want to do that? Since we are going to be getting information from the user, we want model validation. And we could add some data annotations to our user profile class, but that also has the side effect of modifying the behavior of our database. So instead, we can use yet another view model to pass information from the controller to the view and vice versa. This will give us the flexibility of keeping our user profile class pristine while also giving us the ability to validate the information coming from the user within our view model class. So let's go to our view models folder. Let's right click and add a new class. And let's call this edit profile view model. And we basically want to replicate the properties of our user profile class. Let's first start with the ID, which is an integer, and then we also have the email, which is, of course, a string. Now, the email address is required, so let's go ahead and let's add the required attribute. And then for the error message, we will simply say that please enter your email address. And then we can also use the email address attribute. And the error message for this validator will be please enter a valid email address. The next property is name, so public string name. This should be required, so let's add the required attribute. And the error message will be please enter your name. Next is the website. Now, the property in our user profile class is website URL, but let's just stick with website. And then we have a validator called URL, which will validate this value. And if it's not a valid URL, then we want to prompt the user to please enter a valid URL. And then finally, the biography, which is a string. And let's set a maximum amount of characters. Let's go for 140 characters, so it can be only as long as a ribbit. And of course, we need to specify that in the error message, so the bio can only be 140 characters. And really, instead of hard coding that value in the error message, let's use the format identifier of 0. And that'll take the value of our first argument and apply it there within the string. So now that we have this written, let's go back to our controller. And for the view, let's pass a new edit profile view model object. where we will set the bio equals profile.bio, the email equals profile.email, ID equals profile.id, name equals profile.name, and then website equals profile.website URL. And since we're here, let's just go ahead and write the code for the edit action method. The method will accept a parameter of type edit profile view model, and we'll just call this model. We first of all need to check if the user is authenticated. We should also check if the model state is valid. And if it isn't, then we want to send them back to the index view. So return view index, and we'll pass in model. But if everything is okay, then we want to update the profile. So we will use our profiles service, and we'll call a method called update, and we'll pass the model there. And then we will redirect to the index. Now, before we write our view for the index action method, let's go ahead and let's implement the getBy method and the update method in our profile service. Let's first go to the interface and let's define these. The getBy method is going to return a user profile object. The name is getBy, and then the parameter is an integer called ID. The second method is update, and it will accept an edit profile view model object, and we'll call that model. In the class itself, let's first write the getBy method, public user profile getBy int ID, and we will use the find method on our repository. So find p.id equals ID. The update method is just a little bit more involved, although we need to return there. The update is public void update. The parameter is edit profile view model. And first we want to create a profile object. So let's call this profile equals new user profile. And then we want to build it, and I will use the initializer syntax. So the ID equals profile or model.id, bio equals model.bio, email equals model.email, name equals model.name, and then finally website URL equals model.website. Then after we build that object, we want to update it. So once again, we will use our profiles repository. We will call the update method and pass in that profile object. Then we want to save the changes. And that's it. So our service is done. Now we just need to write the view for our index action method. So let's right click, add view. This is a strongly typed view, and the data type is edit profile view model. And then let's add that to the project. Let's change the title to edit profile. And then in the left panel section, so let's do at section left panel, we want to use our form. At using var form equals HTML begin form, we want the edit action method on the profile controller. The first thing we should do is add the anti-forgery token so that I don't forget that. Let's also add a hidden field for our ID. So we'll use the hidden for method and then specify the ID property. And now we just need our form fields. And I'm going to type the first few and then I will paste in the rest. So let's first of all create a label, and this will be for the email. And then right after this div element, we will add the text box for our email. We'll use the editor for method and then use the email property. We'll do the same thing for the name. So to make this a little faster, I will copy and paste and change the property name. And then I will paste in the rest of the form. For the bio, I'm using the text area for method because we need more than just a simple text box. But we're going to need to modify our style because currently the ribbit text class is only applied to text area elements within the right panel. So let's go to our less file and let's do a search for ribbit text. There it is. So let's copy this text area and then let's add it right here. That will style the text area very nicely. We don't need to display the validation summary because that is handled within our layout page. So really this is it. Let's run our application and let's see if this works. After you log in, go to the Edit Profile link The bio still wasn't styled correctly. I probably put it in the wrong place, but let's make some modifications to our profile. I'm going to add in my website URL, and for the bio, this is a test bio. Let's click on save. Those values are still there, so that means that they were saved in the database. So let's go and look at the profiles. We can see that now the bio is in my profile. If we look at the profile, there's the bio. And of course, if we modified the email, then the Gravatar would change. And if we modified the name, then we would see that modification there as well. And so there you have it, a complete Twitter clone. Although it's more akin to the Twitter from several years ago before they started adding a lot of extra features, but it's a Twitter clone nonetheless.